Good morning and welcome to the February 2023, just after the Super Bowl. That's for you, Commissioner Starks. Open meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce our agenda today?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Good morning to you and good morning, Commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear two items for your consideration. First, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking, which would begin the Commission's required implementation of the Safe Connections Act of 2022. The proposal seeks to help survivors of domestic violence and similar crimes separate lines from shared mobile accounts that include their abusers, protect the privacy of calls made by survivors to domestic abuse hotlines, and support survivors who face financial hardship through the Commission's affordability programs. Second, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking, which would seek comments on improvements to the E-rate program that would increase access for tribal applicants generally, as well as within the tribal library's E-rate pilot program. This is your agenda for today. Please note the Media Bureau's restricted adjudicatory matter, as listed in the February 9th Sunshine Notice, was adopted by the Commission and deleted from today's agenda. The first item is titled Helping Domestic Violence Survivors Access Safe and Affordable Connectivity, and will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. Trent Harkrader, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Now, before we proceed, I want to introduce a very special guest who is joining us today. Tashira Monroe is the Deputy Director of My Sister's Place, which is a Washington, D.C.-based organization that shelters, supports, and empowers survivors of domestic violence and their children while providing leadership and education to build a supportive community. Now, she has generously agreed to appear with us today to share with me and my colleagues her firsthand experience working with survivors of domestic violence and abuse. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. The floor is yours.
Good morning, Chairwoman and members of the Commission. My name is Tashira Monroe, Deputy Director of My Sister's Place, a DC nonprofit that has dedicated over 40 years to addressing domestic violence through sheltering, housing, and providing comprehensive supportive services to persons seeking refuge from violent homes. We serve approximately 500 survivors annually, including children exposed to violence. In doing this work for over 10 years with My Sister's Place, I've had the privilege of assisting survivors in their journey to thrive free from violence. I've also witnessed the many barriers and challenges they face that put them and their family at risk of further harm, or worse, death. I am here today to express my excitement and support of the Safe Connections Act of 2022. I am elated at the intentionality of the Safe Connections Act. It takes into account the sense of urgency for a person or family who is actively fleeing domestic violence. The technology created to keep families safer, like family tracking apps, Find My Phone apps, and others, can be used by an abuser to stalk or track a victim and catch them in vulnerable places. Family mobile plans, they're great for lowering costs, but are terrible for a family who needs to stay in contact while they plan to leave a violent home. Abusers use the phones as a means of control, threatening to cut the phone off or limit access to children's lines. The control of the phone limits what the survivor can do to seek out help, as the abuser has access to their call history, text messages, and data. Without a separate line, a victim risks being punished for seeking help. Those advocates and agencies that assist survivors are at risk too, as information about confidential locations like ours could be stored in the phone's GPS history. We have experienced firsthand what an abuser is capable of, and it's truly terrifying. As noted by the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, leaving an abuser is the most dangerous time for a victim of intimate partner violence. The pattern of control is being broken, and abusers will go to great lengths to regain power. The decision to leave an abusive relationship is a complicated one that takes into consideration children, finances, community, resources, faith, safety, lethality, the unknown. and often starts with a call to a domestic violence resource hotline or organization. These calls allow survivors to talk through their barriers, get links to local resources, and most importantly, develop a safety plan. Cell phones are an integral part of safety planning. It's a survivor's direct link to resources, to support systems, to their children, their work, all of the most important aspects of their lives, just like you and I. They can also serve as a place to store evidence of the abuse through pictures, videos, saved text messages, and voicemails. Without this device, a survivor is very vulnerable, and abuser knows that. It is imperative that a survivor is able to seek assistance without the abuser being aware. Knowing that the survivor is planning to leave can often trigger abusers to escalate intimidation and tactics to keep the survivor trapped. That often includes taking their phone, breaking it, and even shutting off the service. Keeping these calls off the log seems like a simple idea, but it's ingenious. It allows the survivor to access resources without further compromising their safety. In the field, unfortunately, resources come and go, and as a result, it is imperative there is a DV resource database that is updated yearly to ensure the information is accurate and current. With nearly 20 people per minute physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States, implementing a low barrier bifurcation process for survivors who have decided to leave could be a life-saving measure. By low barrier, I mean a low burden of proof of the abuse, minimal questions, and a streamlined process. When a survivor has decided to leave, time is of the essence. They need their phone to flee, to be in contact with service providers, concerned family members, the shelter to which they are fleeing. They need to be in contact with their children, their jobs, the prosecutor, who is depending on them to be a witness in the case against the abuser. Without the phone, none of these happen smoothly, if at all. Many cases are dropped because the prosecuting office is unable to get in touch with the survivor by the phone. And often the phone was damaged by the abuser in the altercation because they know it's a lifeline. We are certainly moving in the right direction, and it may take multiple conversations and implementation plans to get this right. A large part of getting it right is integrating access to domestic violence resources information for survivors who seek bifurcation, including lifeline programs. 98% of survivors report financial abuse, and when leaving, will need additional supportive services as they recover from that abuse. Lifeline will keep survivors connected with those support systems and resources as they get back on their feet. The Safe Connections Act has the potential to free families from violence and keep them connected to their supportive networks. I thank you, Chairwoman and members of the Commission, for the opportunity to share my suggestions and my support of the Safe Connections Act.
Thank you, Tashira, for your remarks today, and more importantly, for the work that you do. All right, we're going to get down to business with that introduction behind us. Mr. Harkrader, please bring your crew up, and you can proceed when you're ready.
Good morning. Thank you, Tashira, for reminding us what we are working for. This morning, I am very pleased to present from the Wireline Competition Bureau for your consideration a notice of proposed rulemaking that would implement the Safe Connections Act of 2022, which was enacted by Congress this past December to preserve safe access to communication services for survivors of domestic and sexual violence and other related crimes. And this item, as you might imagine, reflects the work of a great many people across the agency. I want to thank the entire Wireline Competition Bureau first and foremost for their hard work, and also my colleagues in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs, Enforcement, and Wireless Telecommunications Bureaus, as well as the Office of Communications Business Opportunities, Economics and Analytics, the General Counsel, and the Managing Director for their review and helpful feedback. So seated at the table with me from the Wireline Bureau are from the front office, Diane Holland, and from the Competition Policy Division, Jody May and Ed Kratchmer and Aurelie Matthew. And then from the Telecommunications Access Policy Division, Jody Griffin. Aurelie will now present the item.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Domestic violence and abuse is a concerning safety and public health problem that not only causes individual harm and imposes severe societal cost on survivors, but also impacts their families, friends, and colleagues. Reliable, safe, and affordable access to phone and broadband connectivity is a critical tool for survivors escaping a relationship involving domestic violence, human trafficking, or other related crimes and abusive situations. This connectivity can assist survivors in breaking away from their abusers and finding and maintaining contact with safe support networks. Further, having access to an independent phone or broadband connection can allow survivors to talk and text safely and to access vital services without fear of their communications, location, and other private information being revealed to their abusers. However, survivors whose phones and associated telephone numbers are part of a multi-line or other plan shared with an abuser can face difficulties separating lines from those shared plans and also maintaining affordable service. The item before you, if adopted, continues the Commission's efforts to support the connectivity needs of survivors and begins the process of implementing the Safe Connections Act of 2022, which provides important statutory support for specific measures to benefit survivors. The Safe Connections Act amends the Communications Act of 1934 to require mobile service providers to separate the line of a survivor of domestic violence and other related crimes and abuse, and any individuals in the care of the survivor, from a mobile service contract shared with an abuser within 2 business days after receiving a request from the survivor. Additionally, the Safe Connections Act requires the Commission to designate either the Lifeline program or the Affordable Connectivity Program as the vehicle for providing survivors suffering financial hardship with emergency communication support for up to 6 months. Finally, the Safe Connections Act directs the Commission to consider whether to, and how the Commission should, establish a central database of hotlines to be used by service providers and require such providers to omit any records of calls or text messages to the hotlines from consumer-facing call and text message logs, subject to certain conditions. Congress directed the Commission to adopt rules implementing the line separation requirement and affordability support within 18 months after enactment of the Safe Connections Act, and to initiate rulemaking to consider the establishment of a central database of hotlines within 180 days of enactment. To implement the Safe Connections Act, the notice, if adopted, seeks comment on proposed rules that would help survivors separate service lines from accounts that include their abusers, protect the privacy of calls made by survivors to domestic abuse hotlines, and support survivors that pursue line separation requests and face financial hardship through the Commission's affordability programs. Specifically, the notice first seeks comment on a number of issues regarding implementation of the line separation requirement, including definitions of key terms, details regarding submissions of line separation requests, provider processing of requests, financial responsibility and account billing following line separations, and other critical details. Second, the item proposes to adopt the requirement that service providers protect the privacy of calls and text messages to hotlines in the manner described in the Safe Connections Act, proposing broad definitions of call and text message logs and covered hotlines, and seeking input on numerous implementation issues, many aimed at establishing the most comprehensive central database of hotlines possible. Third, the item takes comment on whether the Commission should designate the Lifeline Program or Affordable Connectivity Program to provide emergency communication support to survivors, while also seeking comment on how to determine when a survivor suffers from financial hardship, ways to improve the enrollment process of either program while protecting the safety of survivors, and several administrative and operational issues for providing emergency communication support. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench. We will start with Commissioner Carr.
Thank you to the chair so much for bringing this item forward. I want to start by recognizing Director Monroe and thanking you for your really powerful, moving testimony. I think it painted in very clear terms so many of the different complex issues and challenges that arise when someone is seeking out for help, for making a change. And I think one of the things that you really made clear is the hurdles that exist. They may seem 3 or 4 feet high, but if you don't have access to a connection, it can double, it can triple, it can seem impossible. So I think you really helped us understand so many ways that having an independent connection quickly can really play an important role in helping people thrive once they move out of these just terrible situations. So thank you for everything you said about that. Very pleased that this legislation passed. Thanks to the team as well for all the hard work on it. I think this is going to be one of those that doesn't generate all the political level headlines, but will be a very meaningful action by the FCC that I think all of us will ultimately be proud of. So I look forward to the record developing and working with my colleagues on it. So thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Starks.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Would also like to thank you, Ms. Monroe, for the important work that My Sister's Place does, for your work, in addition to obviously the other many support groups that they all do to protect victims of domestic violence. Your testimony did, of course, further cement the need for this commission to move, to act, and quickly to provide that essential lifeline and support those as they create that new life for them and their families as they are freed from violence. In the United States, over 12 million people each year are affected by domestic violence, and the majority are women. As we heard, for those in unsafe situations, communications technology is critical. The difference between life and death in instances, and often the only way for them to help and find and get to a safe place, as I've mentioned before. From the Hamilton families that I visited in San Francisco to Miriam's Kitchen here in DC, I've seen and visited with survivors of domestic and sexual abuse, with the staff that help support those abuse survivors, and have been stirred by the courage and resiliency that they exhibit. And so for our part, it's only right that we meet these survivors where they are. Ensure that they have both access to a communications lifeline and that their use of those communication resources will not place themselves or others in danger from their abusers. I'm glad that in implementing the Safe Connections Act, we seek comment on our proposal to establish the right process to assist survivors through line separation, as we heard from the presentation, remove hotlines from consumers facing call logs. Once these rules are adopted, those in dangerous situations will be able to connect with services such as the National Domestic Violence Hotline and local domestic violence shelters in order to get the help that they need. I'm glad that we're seeking comment on properly defining what's a covered hotline and how to best identify the services that support survivors. More generally, would like to, of course, thank the senators that worked on this, the Hill folks, Senator Schatz, Rosen, Blumenthal, Scott, Fisher, alongside Representatives Kuster and Eshoo, for their true leadership in helping to pass the Safe Connection Act. Thank you to the team for all of your hard work as well. This will make a real difference in real lives. I strongly approve this item.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Monroe, for being here with us today and for sharing your perspective, showing the urgency of taking action on this important issue. These proposed rules might seem like common sense when they're laid out in front of us as a completed package, but it's only through the hard work of advocates, of Congress, and of the Commission staff that we're able to get to this point. So thanks everyone for your efforts on this, and I hope we can get to vote on a final order soon.
Thank you, Commissioners. You know, it was Valentine's Day this week, and for most of us, that means cue the flowers and chocolate. After all, it's our national holiday to celebrate relationships. Of course, relationships are complicated. Not every one of them is healthy. And yet every one of us deserves relationships free from domestic violence. There are some extraordinary people in this country and this community who help those who have experienced domestic violence. I know because I recently had the opportunity to sit down with leadership from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the National Center for Victims of Crime, the DC Coalition Against Domestic Violence, Mary Center, and My Sister's Place. And on Valentine's Day, I visited My Sister's Place, a domestic violence shelter right here in our nation's capital. What I learned is that domestic abuse often happens in silence. Abusers rely on shame and stigma. They will cut off their partners from resources and support systems. They will quietly and consistently make it difficult for them to break away and build a new life for themselves and their families. But we are going to do our part to break that silence. That's because the Federal Communications Commission now has authority under the Safe Communications Act to help provide survivors of domestic abuse with a line to reach out, keep connected, and stay safe. The law provides a pathway for survivors to swiftly and securely separate from communications contracts like family plans. It also sets up a way for survivors to receive emergency communication support from Lifeline or the Affordable Connectivity Program. Just as important, we are making sure communications are private. To this end, the law sets a path for identifying and removing hotline numbers from call and text logs so that those seeking help can do so without fear of discovery by their abuser. Today, we ask questions about all of these aspects of the Safe Connections Act. Every one of them builds on a record we already developed as an agency in an inquiry last year where we sought to explore how survivors of domestic violence can stay connected. We are working hard. We are going to make this happen. And along the way, we are building relationships. So let me announce one of them right here and now. Today, the wireless industry will join with the National Domestic Violence Hotline to launch a partnership to support survivors. The carriers involved, including the largest providers of wireless service, will set up systems so that when survivors call to leave a family plan and set up a new line, that incoming call will be received by someone who will offer support and resources from those who work with survivors of domestic abuse. We are going to turn this call into a touch point that is meaningful and helpful. So thank you to the carriers who worked with us to make the partnership to support survivors possible. Now, another relationship I want to highlight is just how meaningful it has been to hear from Toshiro Monroe from My Sister's Place about domestic violence survivors and just what we can do to provide valuable support. She's a total dynamo, and I am so glad that she was able to join us for our vote here today. And I want to thank her for taking myself and members of my office on a tour of your facility on Valentine's Day. Finally, I want to thank Senator Schatz, Senator Fisher, Representative Eshoo, Representative Wahlberg, and Representative Custer for championing the Safe Connections Act. We are all here because you made passage of this law a priority. And we're grateful for your work, and we're going to do good things with this new responsibility. I also want to thank all the people at the agency who worked on this effort, and it was a lot of them. So that includes Allison Baker, David Brodian, Jessica Campbell, Callie Coker, Adam Copeland, Jody Griffin, Travis Hahn, Trent Harkrader, Diane Holland, Melissa Droller-Kirkle, Ed Kratchmer, Chris Laughlin, Arielle Matthew, Jody May, Nick Page, and Haley Steffen from the Wireline Competition Bureau. Garnet Hanley, Giorgio Laris, John Lockwood, and Jennifer Salas from the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. Ed Bartholomew, Barbara Esbin, Aaron Garza, Derek Goetzen, Sayuri Rajapaski, and Kimberly Wild from the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, along with Bambi Kraus from the Office of Native Affairs and Policy, Pamela Gallant, Callan Lee, Georgia Feigen, Mindy Littell, and Pam Slipikoff from the Enforcement Bureau, Melina Barzilai, William Dever, Andrea Kelly, Eugene Kiselev, Richard Mallon, William Richardson, Jeffrey Steinberg, and Elliot Tarloff from the Office of General Counsel. Mark Azik, Marcy Wakakala, and Joanna Fisher from the Office of Economics and Analytics, Thomas Buckley, Mark Stevens, and Sanford Williams from the Office of Managing Director, and Kara Grayer, Michael Gasso, and Joy Ragsdale from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities. And with that, we will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
And the chair votes aye. The item is adopted with the editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 2 on your agenda is titled Connecting Tribal Communities to Broadband and will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. And once again, Trent Harkrader, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Harkrader, please proceed.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. The Wireline Competition Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration a notice of proposed rulemaking that, if adopted, will seek comment on a variety of improvements to the E-rate program to encourage participation by tribal participants. As always, I would like to thank the Bureau for their hard work and our colleagues in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau's Office of Native Affairs and Policy in particular, the Office of General Counsel, the Office of Communications Business Opportunities, and the Office of Economics and Analytics for their very, very hard work on this item. Johnny Roddy, from an honors attorney in the Bureau's Telecommunications Access and Policy Division, will now present the item.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. In today's notice of proposed rulemaking, if adopted, we seek to simplify and improve the E-rate program rules for tribal applicants and encourage greater tribal participation. The E-rate program provides support to eligible schools and libraries for affordable, high-speed broadband services and internal connections to connect today's students and library patrons with next-generation learning opportunities and services. Last year, the Commission expanded access to the E-rate program, which helped open the door for tribal library applicants to access E-rate support. Last November, the Commission launched the Tribal Library Pilot Program, which provides one-on-one assistance to tribal library participants, many of whom will be applying for E-rate funding for the first time. Tribal libraries, as well as tribal schools, still face many challenges in gaining access to E-rate support. If adopted, this notice of proposed rulemaking aims to address these challenges. First, the notice seeks comment on whether tribal college libraries should be eligible to participate in the E-rate program. Second, the notice seeks comment on ways to simplify and improve the E-rate application process for tribal applicants. Specifically, this notice, if adopted, will seek comment on the forms and portions of the E-rate E-rate application process that create the greatest burdens for tribal applicants. The notice also seeks comment on streamlining the competitive bidding process by exempting purchases of low-cost equipment and services up to a reasonable pre-discount price level, helping tribal applicants to more easily fund their basic internet needs. In addition, it seeks comment on whether it would be beneficial to have either an extended or separate application filing window for tribal library applicants to better align with existing tribal government procurement requirements and procedures. Third, the notice seeks to better understand the challenges that tribal libraries face regarding the E-rate program's cost allocation rules, whether tribal libraries are experiencing unique challenges as a result of these rules, and how the Commission can best address these difficulties. Fourth, the notice seeks comment on proposed changes to the E-rate rules that would increase the maximum discount rate for tribal entities from 85% to 90% for internal connections or the equipment and services that make broadband accessible throughout the tribal library and school. The notice also seeks comment on whether to raise the $25,000 funding floor for these Category 2 budgets for tribal entities. Fifth, the notice seeks comment on whether to add a tribal community representative to the Universal Service Administrative Company's Board of Directors to increase tribal leadership at USAC and in E-rate and other Universal Service Fund programs. Finally, The notice seeks comment on other measures the Commission could take to make it easier for tribal and other small or rural non-tribal applicants to participate in the E-rate program, as well as seeking comment on adopting a definition of tribal for use in the E-rate program. The staff recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Thanks. A little while ago, I had the chance to visit the Mescalero Apache Reservation, which sits in sort of the south-central portion of New Mexico. It's a very mountainous area. When I was there, it was snow-covered at the time. When I was there, I had a chance to visit the Mescalero Apache School and met with some of the students that are really engaged in STEM classes as a priority. One of the students was named Lana. She'd already finished a portion of the STEM training, had learned to code, and actually demonstrated to me a mini robot that she had coded at the school. And it was a stark reminder of the opportunity that can exist when we get connectivity into these communities, the innovation that can flourish, that we all end up benefiting from. They had a pretty good connection at the school already, but we need to find ways that we can continue to expand on that so we see a lot more stories like Lana, really, really smart people that when given the opportunity to an affordable internet connection can truly thrive. And I think this is what the item before us aims to do with simplifying some of the application procedures, looking at other issues that we're seeking comment on. So I look forward to the record as it develops and working with my colleagues, so the notice has my support. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Starks.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. For too long, those on tribal lands have remained on the wrong side of the digital divide. Today's item, of course, builds on our 2022 order that helped expand broadband access on tribal lands by clarifying that tribal libraries could participate in E-rate and launching the Tribal Library Pilot Program. But there is more work to be done. Last year, in particular, I visited the Denver Indian Center, which serves as a gathering point for over 60,000 strong American Indians located in Colorado. That Denver Indian Center provides its community with support ranging from food banks to workforce programs, and it is heavily focused on the issue of connectivity. Along with Rick Waters, its executive director, and his colleagues, I sat down for well over an hour and discussed the challenges facing some of the tribes there in Colorado and beyond, including the lack of broadband availability and the need for community anchors to be connected. The reality is that broadband deployment in those communities with dual functioning libraries continues to be low, and only a small number of tribal libraries have applied for E-rate funding due to the complexity of the application process, but that changes now. This item proposes and seeks comment on how to simplify sections of our E-rate application process, and I hope that we're able to move quickly to an order so that we can help support the connectivity needs of those that continue to live on tribal lands. This is fantastic work by the team. Thank you for your leadership on this, Chairwoman. It also has my very strong support today. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. Unnecessary bureaucratic overhead is an obstacle to effective government, and I'm pleased to support this item that looks into how we can better streamline the E-rate program, specifically taking into account the unique situations of tribal governments. I hope this proceeding produces a robust record of suggestions for improving access to the program, while also maintaining and strengthening safeguards against waste, fraud, and abuse. Thanks very much.
Thank you, commissioners. If you drive straight south from Albuquerque, you'll eventually reach the tribal lands of the Pueblo of Isleta. The Pueblo of Isleta, there are one of 19 pueblos in New Mexico. And right in the center of the community, with the Sandia Mountains in the background, you'll find the St. Augustine Church. It's built from fieldstone, and it's covered in a plaster that has been bleached white by the unrelenting sun. The church is a grand monument to culture and community. It's also old, really old. It dates back to 1613. The Pueblo of Isleta have been gathering and worshiping here for centuries. So I visited in December, and it was one of the first stops on the Federal Communications Commission's Tribal Libraries Tour. This visit, one of several we have put together, was designed to meet with Native communities and speak to them about the resources we have to help bring broadband to tribal libraries. While in New Mexico, we spent time with the librarian at the Pueblo of Isleta and the librarian at the Pueblo of Laguna, and then we also went back to the city and held a roundtable with tribal leaders at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center in Albuquerque. We started this tour because we are on a mission. We want to make sure that every tribal library knows about the E-rate program. The E-rate program has been around for a quarter of a century, and that's nothing compared to the church in Isleta. But in its time, the program has become a quiet powerhouse, supporting high-speed internet service in libraries nationwide. Those libraries are in big cities and small towns. They are in every corner of the country. So we want to make sure every tribal library knows about the E-rate program and has the opportunity to use it to go online, stay online, and keep their communities connected. That is why a year ago, the Commission adjusted its E-rate definition of library to ensure that tribal libraries are included. You see, it used to be, under our older rules, that if a tribal library was not designated an eligible library by a state agency, a designation that can pose problems of sovereignty, they were unable to participate in the E-rate program. But the Commission finally fixed it. And this was just the start because there is so much more to do to encourage tribal participation in E-rate. That's what today's rulemaking is all about. We ask about how we can simplify forms and procedures for those on tribal lands. We seek information about the funding floor and discount rate and how it functions in tribal communities. This is important because we know that every time a library makes use of E-rate, it grows incrementally less expensive to bring broadband to nearby homes and businesses. And on tribal lands, which includes some of the most remote locations in this country, this really matters. Now, I saw that in New Mexico, but our tour has already also included visits to 5 tribal libraries in Washington, and next up is an engagement with Alaska Native communities. So our rulemaking builds on this work that we have already done, and it also builds on an effort we started with the E-rate Tribal Library Pilot Program to provide one-on-one assistance to new tribal library applicants interested in looking to E-rate for support. So like I said, we are on a mission. We're going to keep at it and keep finding ways to expand the reach of E-rate to bring more broadband to more libraries on tribal lands. Because I can't stop thinking about that church standing tall for centuries at the Pueblo of Isleta. It's a reminder of just how long Native communities have been on this land. They should not be the last to benefit from the opportunities of the digital age. Now, for this effort and for developing our tour of libraries on tribal lands, I want to have a big thank you to Bambi Kraus, who leads our Office of Native Affairs and Policy. I also want to thank so many others who have helped contribute to this work, including Allison Baker, Kate Dumichel, Jody Griffin, Trent Harkrader, Hilda Kalawal, Sue McNeil, Molly O'Connor, Johnny Roddy, Janae Schreiber, Haley Steffen, and Adrian Wright from the Wireline Competition Bureau. Eddie L. Casperalta, Lloyd Collier, Barbara Esbin, Alejandro Roark, and Jill Springer from the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Melina Barzilai, Richard Mallon, and William Richardson from the Office of General Counsel, Eugene Kiselev and Shane Taylor from the Office of Economics and Analytics, and Kara Grayer, Joy Ragsdale, and Shauna Wilkerson from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities. And with that, we will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Now, would any of my colleagues like to make announcements at this time? Commissioner Carr. Commissioner Starks.
Yes, very briefly, Madam Chairwoman, a very serious subject. That is celebrating the Kansas City Chiefs, as was mentioned at the very top.
I gave you
yes,
the opportunity.
Yes,
All right.
yes. You can see I'm wearing my red tie here today. Make sure each of you out there celebrate Chiefs Kingdom here at some point. The parade, of course, was in Kansas City yesterday, but I'm here today. Couldn't make it back home, but it was an epic Super Bowl. Thank
All
you.
right. I should have saw that coming. You got anything, Commissioner Symington? You got nothing. All right. All right. But I got something big here because we are going to announce the retirement of Diane Holland from federal service. And I really want to celebrate her career. It perfectly tracks the last 25 years of telecom and tech policy in Washington. So her story really starts in the mid-90s. She graduated from Howard University School of Law, spent some time at a law firm, and then had a teaching fellowship at Georgetown University Law Center, and then joined the FCC in 1996. And 1996, of course, probably rings a bell because she made her way here right as the agency was enacting the Telecommunications Act of 1996. No small thing. And she did big things while she was here. She worked in the Common Carrier Bureau, first in the Enforcement Division, later in the Network Services Division, where she did instrumental work modernizing our nation's numbering system, which was really no small feat in the wake of the competition and market entry we saw following the Telecommunications Act of 1996. She pulled double duty as the designated federal officer for the North American Numbering Council, and she eventually served as the last chief of that division. I would say she shut that place down. And that was when I first got to know her as a staff attorney myself. She was formidable. She went on to serve in the Bureau's front office, then joined the General Counsel's office. While she was there, she helped manage the Attorney Honors Program. She went off after that to the private sector, first joining a trade association, and later joining the National Urban League, which gave her an opportunity to marry all that she knows about tech and telecom with her longtime passion for civil rights. Now, at the end of 2019, she found her way back to the FCC at the invitation of Commissioner Starks. She joined his office as a legal advisor for, get this, media and consumer protection issues. She took on some brand new things. And later, I was thrilled when she took our offer to head back to the Wireline Bureau, where she began, and she was a force for good working on the Lifeline and Affordable Connectivity Program. All right, so what's next for Diane? She's made it very clear, I should say she is not retiring, but is instead rewiring. I like that. There might be other people who want to use that. As she prepares to take on the honor as serving as the president of the FCBA, the Tech Bar, later this year. So we are going to miss you in these halls. We're going to miss your smarts and good judgment and good sense, but we are really grateful for your quarter of a century long commitment to public service and justice. Thank you, Diane. Yeah.
And I would echo all of that, Diane. I consider you a true friend. Thank you for your length of service at the FCC. The American people have benefited greatly. But from my standpoint, you have been a most trusted advisor. And I mean that in the sense of how hard, the depth of your work, your study, all the experience that you bring to it, but truly I would focus on that trusted part, how you helped me think through some of the most complex issues, advanced priorities that I was focused on, and I mean it. I'm looking forward to continued great things from you during your FCBA presidency. God bless.
Yeah.
And I'll jump in just to add my thanks and congratulations to you as well. You've been such a strong consumer advocate here at the FCC. We've really benefited from that. When I joined the FCC in 2012, you were pretty early on one of my first bosses in OGC, so I know very well that you can handle unruly situations. I think that'll come in handy in your next endeavor. So thank you again so much for all your service, and obviously we'll continue, and we look forward to seeing what you're going to do.
I'd like to add my thanks as well, and to say that I'm looking forward to seeing the roasts that get concocted for the next chairman's dinner. Thanks very much.
She is not retiring, she's rewiring. I love that. All right. Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next date for the Commission's monthly agenda meeting?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, March 16th, 2023.
Until then, we stand adjourned.
Good morning, everyone. If folks could take their outside conversations to the hallway, to the lobby, we'd greatly appreciate it. We're about to get started with the Chairwoman's post-open meeting press conference. And with that, I welcome Chairwoman Rosenworcel to the podium.
Hi there. Let's start with Gabriella.
Good morning, Madam
Good
Chairwoman.
morning.
So I wanted to ask you about the item today regarding communication services for survivors. I understand that the NPRM is going to have to go through the comment process, that record has to be reviewed before an order can be written up and adopted, but how much of a priority do you think that you'll be making this, your office will be making this throughout the year, and how quickly are you ultimately hoping to get a final order on this item?
Well, I don't have an estimate for you. I think you can tell by the time we spent on this issue that it is a high priority. As you probably know, we also had an inquiry on this subject last year, anticipating that this law might come to pass. And now that it has, we have invested in relationships with a lot of authorities who know a lot about domestic violence and how survivors have to navigate complex things like making sure that their communications are safe. I am going to make a priority getting this done, and I'm also grateful for the wireless industry stepping up and developing this partnership for survivors.
I was actually going to ask you about that announcement as well. Could you share which carriers have said they're going to participate yet, or is that coming at a later time, that announcement?
That's coming at a later time, but all the largest wireless carriers have agreed to support the partnership to support survivors. The idea is really simple, and it was an outgrowth of our conversations with experts on domestic abuse. They said that call, it feels bureaucratic and ministerial to just shut down your phone and try to separate, is an important decision for any survivor of domestic abuse. And if we could turn that touch point into something meaningful and helpful, we could do a lot of good. And I'm pleased to say that we are on the way to doing just that. And I'm really grateful for everyone who participates in making this happen.
Thank you.
Hi, Chairwoman. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about Spectrum Auction Authority. It's expiration coming up in about 3 weeks. Could you give us a sense of where talks stand on that matter? And do you expect elements of the Spectrum Innovation Act to possibly be included in that the bill that passed last year in the House?
Lots of talks, lots of back and forth in anticipation of that March 9th deadline. I think spectrum auctions at the Federal Communications Commission have been a good deal for the United States. They have helped support our economic and national security. Since we've had this authority, we've held over 100 auctions, and we've raised more than $233 billion. More than that. We put out into the economy airwaves that have helped create so much in wireless innovation that's used not just domestically but worldwide. So it's authority we want to see continue, and I know there are lots of people hard at work on that, so stay tuned. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And with that, I'll call up my colleague, Ann Weigel, who will be running the Bureau press conference.
Good morning. Wireline Bureau will come forward to take questions on the first NPRM, helping domestic violence survivors get safe and affordable access to communications. Want to step up?
Good morning. How's it going?
Good morning. So just one question on, actually it's for both of the items, if there were any major changes to either of them.
On the Safe Connections Act item, we received feedback from the offices about, the only major change I would say was we've received feedback about whether to, we're supposed to, under the statute, pick either Lifeline or the Affordable Connectivity Program as the designated program. We initially had proposed Lifeline as that, and we're going to see comment on that. And the commissioners wanted us to step back and just ask, which one should we pick? Make it less of a proposal and more of just a see comment on which of the two programs.
So just to clarify, so you're not making, you're not seeking comment on whether one or the other or both, or am I understanding that right?
So the statute requires us to pick either Lifeline or the Affordable Connectivity Program as the designated program.
So it can't be both?
That's how I read the statute.
Okay. All right. And then the other item as well, were there any major changes to that on the tribal E-rate?
No major changes. There was some small tweaks, as there always are, in response to ex partes and also from the offices, but nothing like there was on the Safe Connections Act.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
Great. Thank you both.
Thanks.
This concludes the Bureau press conference, and if anyone else would like to come forward, I believe Commissioner Carr. The one and only Commissioner Carr.
All right, good to see such a robust turnout among the reporters. This is the diehard, the real ones right here. So happy to jump right into it if you guys got any questions.
Okay. Hey, Commissioner. I just wanted to ask, the ENC chair, well, the committee voted on the oversight plan for the next 2 years in the House, and I just was wondering if there were any surprises in that for you, or anything you'd prefer that they focus on in particular.
Well, I think as a general matter, if you look back over the last 2 years, we've had a lot of appropriations made available for various broadband programs, whether it's infrastructure or digital divide efforts. And one of the things that I have put out a number of statements over the last year plus is the need for really diligent oversight of all those programs. We obviously have seen before with ARRA from the 2008 era, where there was headline level of abuses in those programs. So I think it's going to be vital, from my perspective, it's not a partisan issue, but really increased oversight of all these broadband programs, especially as we start to hit the point in time in which a lot of these dollars are going to start moving out the door, whether it's B dollars or ARPA dollars. There's a lot of money out there, and I think we've already seen some reports, including by GAO, about a potential lack of coordination across all those programs. So I think that's going to be, very important policy ground to tread, is to have really diligent oversight of those programs.
Hi, Commissioner. So as you're probably well aware, with the whole DirecTV Newsmax being dropped, I was wondering, what you think of the situation and whether you think that the FCC should get involved and look into kind of what happened there.
Yeah, I haven't said much about this one. Part of that is there's at least been, from what I've read in the press, allegations raised about discrimination based on affiliation, and we have a whole set of rules at the FCC that deal with potential claims of discrimination and carriage disputes based on affiliation. So I sort of want to keep my powder dry to the extent that there is any such complaint filed at the FCC. If there is, then we should take a look at that and be diligent in making sure our rules have been properly complied with. Anybody else? Anything from the overwhelming peanut gallery over here? No? Going once? Okay, good to see you guys. Thanks.